Good morning to you, St. Lucia, as always. Thank you so much for making the time for you to be able to join us here live from the studios of the National Television Network Government Information Service. I'm Melissa Joseph. It is Thursday, it is February. I don't know, we were having some, you don't even want to know. I better, Homer, good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Lisa. And good morning to you viewers as well. Yes, it's one of those mornings. Just leave it alone, all right? It is the 10th of February.
Yes, it is.
It's Lucia and Homer, the morning update right here on the National Television Network. And those of you joining us on channel 122, our Facebook, our YouTube channels, we appreciate you joining us here this morning. We can get right into it. As you know, the Ministry of Health, Wellness, Elderly Affairs always keeps us updated as to our situation in St. Lucia as it refers to the COVID-19 pandemic. And so let's just very quickly, before we get into the meat of the matter this morning, keep you updated on that. So the Ministry of Health, Wellness and Elderly Affairs yesterday received confirmation of a total of 63 new cases of COVID-19. These samples were processed on Tuesday, the 8th of February, from a total of 281 samples, of which 221 were processed at the Ezra Long Laboratory, and 60 samples were processed at Laboratory Services and Consultations Limited. These samples were collected from the 7th to the 8th of February, and this number of positive cases makes up 22.42% of all samples processed on that date. Confirmation was also received of the recovery of 335 individuals diagnosed with COVID-19, bringing the number of active cases in country to date to 1,784. Currently, there are 52 positive cases of COVID-19 admitted at the respiratory hospital, and none of them are critically or severely ill, which is good news. We also saw the Ministry of Health informing us or reminding us that, again, vaccination is one of the primary ways that you can keep yourself safe from COVID-19. And if you are looking to get vaccinated today, the places that you want to go is the Viever RC Parish Hall, as well as the Moshi Wellness Center, and that is between the hours of 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Over to you,
and vaccination, let's not forget that you have two choices just for now, with the AstraZeneca having the batch the Ministry of Health had having been expired, and they are waiting the shipment of a new batch. You can now choose from the Janssen, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, or the Pfizer vaccine. So go out there, as always, do all the consultations you need to, make that decision and get vaccinated. So, Homa, the Prime Minister, Honorable Philip J. Pierre, yesterday, the word did come out of his office that he had tested positive. He seemed to be asymptomatic, from what the office has revealed, that he's doing very well and he's working from home, and just, making sure that they take all the necessary precautions. He is vaccinated, and that is another indication that we should all do the right thing, get vaccinated. And he said that, he's not feeling ill, and we know that vaccination seriously lowers the risk of severe illness, hospitalization, and death. From here, the Government Information Service, all the staff, we wish the Prime Minister very well, and we do hope to see him back on the trail in office.
That's right.
So yesterday when we were here, we did speak about having some special guests and to discuss what can be quite controversial, sensitive, but yet it's really about second chances in a way. And we want to say good morning to staff of the Probation and Parole Department. We have with us the Assistant Director, he's Mr. Cuthbert Henry, and we do have Ms. Shauna Innocent with us, who is a parole officer. Gentlemen, lady, thank you so much for coming on by. This discussion has been long in the making. I've always been very, very interested in being able to sit down and discuss it once I heard that we had gone the route now of parole. But the Probation and Parole Office or Department has been around, at least a name, for a bit of a time, because I remember on my beats as a journalist, as a field reporter, haven't visited the office, done 1 or 2 stories in there. Talk to us about the department, its existence, and what it does.
Well, currently, it's looked at more as a unit within the Department of Home Affairs. And I think formally, if my memory serves me correctly, the unit, the probation and parole unit, it has always been named that way from its inception. I think perhaps in 1996, around that time, when it moved from, I think, maybe social affairs, or it had some other name. And the nomenclature changed around that time, around 1996. And it had a director was appointed and just formalized. However, the parole services aspect only came in just about 2 years ago. We are sort of a ghost unit in government, but we are anybody who encounters us through the services we provide, such as pre-sentence reports for the courts. It takes us a lot into the community, so we meet a lot of people. And now, I suppose, people are more familiar with us, and you go and you say, well, good day, I'm from X and Y, from the probation parole services. They say, yes, I know what you do. My son went through this, so somebody's before the court, and we assist the judicial officers, the judges and the magistrates, in making decisions for writing those reports. Those reports now are legal requirements in cases. And that assists the judges and magistrates in making decisions of whether people go to prison or whatever sort of sentence that is applied to them, especially upon being found guilty in their cases. Because of the change in the law as it relates to juveniles, the Child Justice Act, it took away a lot of the walk-in services that we provided. So some of these services are now diverted to human services. So we no longer deal with the juveniles, the parent who just walk in and look for assistance. So that now has been diverted to human services. So we also are very busy doing mediations for the courts. So we have very skilled, we have trained mediators. We also provide assessments. We do assessments after a young person, a child, because with the Child Justice Act, every single child, every single person below 18 who is arrested must be assessed with mental health screening tools and or the assessment of risk of violence and so on. These persons must be assessed based on the law because that assessment gives the judicial officer, again, a better understanding of who is before them. You also have now some going to leave probation. Apart from us supervising probation officers, we supervise community service. If somebody gets on to do unpaid work from either the low court or the high court, we supervise those persons. We place them in suitable areas, preferably public spaces where they can perform that unpaid labor as part of a community sentence. Then now with parole, we are just starting, and parole is different to probation, where a probationer, somebody who got probation, may never see the prison. But parole, persons who may receive parole have actually been in prison for a considerable amount of time in most cases. So that's the fundamental difference. And with the parole service that we offer, our parole officers, they go to the facility, they do lots of interviews, they go to the communities, they do lots of interviews and assessments. And then when we will get into this later, I suppose, when the parole process has occurred, all the vetting, the investigative process has happened, and it goes then now to the parole hearing, these officers are responsible, officers like Miss Innocent here, are responsible for the supervision and support and keeping the parole board abreast of what's going on, because really parole is the business of the parole board. The probation parole services unit, we focus more as a support. We are a sort of mechanism to assist, but the parole aspect, it really is dependent on the board. The board decides what happens with parole.
And so that's not used. So in a nutshell, because I want our viewers to be able to understand the difference between the two, probation, one may not go to prison, but certainly if the court decides that, if the court has found you guilty of something, the court can decide what sentence they're given. Yes? And so that individual now can be said, well, we're going to sentence you to 500 hours of community service, and that's where you come in.
Right.
So you now will make that determination as to what that community service would be.
Right. So what happens in the probation aspect? Probation is considered a community sentence, yes, because the individual, Lisa, is charged for, let's say, assault, and Lisa is given probation with conditions. So one of those conditions may be community service, 200 hours community service, and maybe compensation to the individual. So that person on the probation order will state what the conditions are. That person comes in and then we decide, okay, that person is best suited to execute their community service in such an X and Y place. And the probation officer will support that person, encourage that person to comply to all the conditions, like paying their fine or their compensation and so on. So the person, if the person does not comply and that person is found in breach, then you will find that person, the default is imprisonment in most cases. And so that's the fundamental difference. So one of the easiest ways to understand the difference between parole and probation is, one, parole must be imprisoned. For you to get parole, you must be incarcerated. So that's the easiest way. But somebody may get probation and they've never ever tasted the doors of the Body Correctional Facility.
Now, say Lucia is falling in line with what is the sort of international the standard now, if you will. I mean, all of us who've watched television, we watch all of these crime series and so forth. We know about the people on parole, whether they've been there for 30 years, 40 years, whatever it is, or you're sentenced to 25 years with the possibility of parole or no parole. So for us, at which end of the spectrum do we fall? Is it that someone, just because they've been sentenced for a long period of time, or are we simply only looking at the lifetime sentence in order for us to make that determination? How did we get into the business of parole?
One of the parts, the second part I will allow Miss Innocent to take on, but you said something I thought it necessary to clarify. You said we are moving, because I'm very concerned as to how our citizenry sees the process. You said we are moving to international standards. I would be more mindful and say international practices, because the standards would require so many other things, services, resources, and these other things. So we are moving into international, or it's not just international, but it's necessary practices, but we may not have all the standards, because people say, oh, you're Zokafesi, you all are doing this and you all don't have X, Y, and Z. So I want to be very mindful from the standpoint of probation and parole services. We know the shortcomings of the entire criminal justice system. So I want to be very mindful. We are moving into some of the practices, and we are trying our best to do the standards as best as we can, because parole does not merely rely on the probation and parole services unit. You have the Body Correctional Facility, that's very important in the process, and the parole board. Ms. Innocent can perhaps respond to the other part of your question.
The other part of the question, in which you were speaking to time frames in terms of how someone is eligible for parole or not, is stated directly within the Criminal Code of St. Lucia. If you check within, I think it's section 1149, it stated there what the eligibility of parole is, and it states that someone who has been sentenced to life imprisonment, they are eligible for parole after having served 15 years. And when I say eligible, it means that they can submit an application to the parole board, and the parole board can go ahead and state whether the parole officers should go into the community to have an investigation done so that can be presented to them. So that is for lifetimers. However, for persons with a determinate sentence, whenever the individual or the inmate had served 1/3 of the sentence that is more than 12 months, then they are eligible for to apply for parole. So all the stipulations of how that happens is within the Criminal Code of St. Lucia, and that has been in existence for quite some time now.
All right, so walk us through that, the application process. So it is, and from what you would have said, it's just for people who've received life sentence, and that would be on capital offenses. But you're also saying that individuals, once they've served 12 months of their determinate sentence,
yes,
that they too can apply. So
yes,
the process is for everyone then?
This is, yes, correct.
Every inmate,
yes, please,
can take. So walk us through what it is that an inmate needs to do in order for them to access that.
So in order to access or to apply for parole, basically, the inmate has to submit an application to the bodily correctional facility, indicate to their unit supervisors or to the director, someone there that they are interested in applying for parole, whenever they've met the eligibility criteria and other factors that may make their application beneficial to them in terms of they've been participating in correctional programs, they've had good behavior, that sort of thing. They submit an application to the correctional facility. The correctional facility in turn submits that application to the Parole Board of St. Lucia. And the chairperson sends these applications to the department, and that the applications we've received, they're distributed. So our managers will distribute among the parole officers who does investigations of the different applicants. And whenever we receive the application, we collect a number of documents. So we collect information from the courts, especially judges' reasons for sentencing. We collect information from the bodily correctional facility to give us an indication of what the inmate has been like at the correctional facility, what they've participated in, what their behavior has been like. We collect that information. If they have had any juvenile records, we also access that as well. So we go to the criminal records office and get that information as well. And then a key part is going into the community. So we go into the community and we get an understanding of what that person's life was in the community, speak to the family, get information from the family in terms of their family life, because the person was an individual before they became an inmate, So what was their life like before they were incarcerated? So we get a clear indication of that. We run assessments. Mr. Henry spoke about that earlier. We run a number of assessments. They are also assessed by the forensic psychologist. So she has to submit a report as well, she or he, whoever that may be, has to submit a report as well. And we compile all of these documents and we present them to the parole board. So all of these documents form what we call a parole dossier. And when the board gets these documents, then they would deliberate, go through the information, process it, and inform us of when the parole hearing will be. So when we've done all of the investigative work for them, we present them with the documents, and they take time to sit and go through the information so that they are prepared when the parole hearing comes around to have a conversation with the inmate. So all of these things inform more or less the application process. I went all over it, so yeah.
I would just like to add to Shana, and the probation and parole unit is placed in a unique position. She related to some of the documents that they filled out from prosecution and the judge's reasons and so on. So we also remember I spoke earlier about the probation aspect where there's a pre-sentence report. That pre-sentence report is a grand analysis of the individual's entire circumstances. Now, we have been lucky to find reports 20-something years old. Pre-sentence reports written by one of our former director, Mrs. Myers. We found those reports and assisted us in our most recent hearings. And these are reports that were written 20-something years ago. So our unit, we take this very seriously, and we look for all the threads that we can to weave together a proper dossier to provide to the parole board. Something you said, Lisa, that I want to clarify. You said one of the fashionable sentencing lines you hear in the US and so on, so possibly the sentencing you to 20 years or whatever with a possibility of parole after so on. So that is not a practice in St. Lucia as yet. Actually, last week I met with Justice Thompson. I also met with the senior magistrate was it on Monday?
Yes.
I met with the senior magistrate on Monday, and we were discussing just that. They have promised to look into the sentencing guidelines to recognize whether they are able as judicial officers to sentence people with the element of parole included in those sentencing orders. So it's gradual, and we need to be circumspect about it to take in all the key players.
You know, I want to talk about the importance of, you know, parole and instituting these practices to the society and our justice system. But, you know, while we're on the thread, just before we get to that, while we're on the thread of the application process, post-application, so, you know, I've served time, I was successful with my application. What happens then? What are the next steps?
When you say successful, you mean after?
So my application was approved, my parole application. After going through the process, it was approved. What are the other steps? So what happens then?
After the hearing, when there's the hearing, the board will provide us with information as to whether the applicant was granted parole or not. So if parole was granted or denied, right? The inmate also receives that information. So that information is sent to the correctional facility and imparted to the applicant, right? If parole is granted, on both occasions we meet with the applicant. So if parole is granted, on the day of release from the correctional facility, the parole officer goes to the correctional facilities to act as that sort of transition from that point of incarceration to back into the community. So we meet them at the correctional facility, have a discussion with them, just go through the release process with them. After which they're supposed to report to the department. That's on the granted, we're speaking on the granted now. So after which they're supposed to report to the department. When they report to the department, parts of the parole order stipulates conditions which they should apply to while on parole. So we go through all of these documents with them. And one of the documents within the parole dossier that we formulate as parole officers is what we call a release plan and community supervision strategy. So that takes effect the moment that the applicant who is now a parolee is out into the community. So when that happens, the parole officer is responsible for supervising the parolee in the community. And we visit their release community. That's important. We always visit their release community. And to just get a feel from community members, and trust me, community members, they're very open. People in St. Lucia, they're very open, and they will talk, they will have conversations with you. So, I mean, just to sidetrack, this whole conversation is happening now, this interview is happening now, but they're part of it. When we go into the community, we take that opportunity to explain to them the process and what's happening. So we do that, and then the parolee participates in different programs that will assist with his resettlement and reintegration into the community. And these programs will vary from all the parolees because it is based on their needs, and all of these needs are identified when we put together the parole dossier. So when we do all of the assessments, we get that information, and from that information we can see what their needs are and what needs to be addressed, what can be a sore point for them in the community, what can create challenges for them in the community, so we facilitate that. If parole is denied, we do go back to the correctional facility just to do some debriefing with the applicant who was denied. So that is what for now, that's what we do with them.
Nice. And moving into the aspect or the point of the importance of parole and introducing parole practices to our society as well as the justice system. Can you speak to that?
The parole, the introduction, either the activation of parole, and I must say, I think in 2001 there was actually a parole act passed, and I think that was repealed or held back or did not receive a cent or whatever. And I think the government decided to go the route of putting it in the criminal code. So parole, the discussion about parole, 2001 from 2020, that's how many years? 11, about 11? Yes, so parole has been, the idea of parole.
20.
20? Yeah, 20.
It shows how bad I was in master's school.
You and I both
Yes,
for a while.
yes. But I am comfortable with that now. So I must say that, yeah, so it has been in discussion for a while. I think the flaw in this is that the discussion was not at the community level, and I do apologize on behalf of successive governments that there was not sufficient, I think, public consultation on the matter, because it is a very sensitive area. Remind me of the question, but I need to say this. You see, why it is sensitive? You see, when, especially in, let's say, a homicide, somebody is killed, you have a loss. So a father is dead, a brother to somebody, a godfather, a breadwinner, a lover, a figure in a house is gone. So children are starving, children are hungry, the person who gets breakdowns and whose children goes. Because when these things happen, the trajectory is tilted to a criminogenic side, that these people become at risk to crime, at risk to vulnerability for certain things, right? So when now you do not consult with the public adequately, and 20 years down the line, we do recognize that our system, our justice system, does not provide victim services. So those victims are not buffered in any way. And 15 years down the line, 20 years down the line, you come in to say to them that the person who killed my father, my brother, my husband, my breadwinner, is going to be released. Albeit that person has done very well at the facility, and that person is indeed going to be a productive person. But then you have the emotional and psychological impact on that family, right? So we understand how sensitive it is, and why people are upset, and why some people are saying that, you know, this person shouldn't be out and that shouldn't happen. But I must also juxtapose, whilst I'm here, in the United Kingdom and a lot of places, especially the United Kingdom, you find somebody who probably commits a robbery or financial crime will get far more time in prison than somebody who commits murder. And that is just the way it is. Because there are circumstances, every case is unique. But here, we are a small country, and everything is close, everyone is close. So I do understand the sensitivities, and I think the importance of parole you're asking, and I wanted to say this to qualify. Somebody will say, but why is this a priority? Why is this important? We have so many other things going on in the country. You have to develop your country in a balanced way. And though some people, because of the emotional affect, the emotional challenge they have suffered, will see this is not a priority. Why are they doing this? You'll have done nothing for me. My little brother go to jail because of that, and so on. So, but you have to, in the development of your country, there are certain things. You sign up to international agreements. You are, if we do not do parole, something else suffers. So it's the evolution and development of the criminal justice process, and it is something that we need to do as a society. It's not just we being soft on these criminals and we want them out and so on. And your question, I guess, will lead to other, maybe I should allow you to probe further, but we are very concerned, but it's a necessity in the development of the criminal justice process and the development, and national development generally.
You say that, and I'm thinking that we often as a society complain about the non-functioning justice system.
Right.
But the parole aspect, as you've explained it, what it is, the purpose it serves, it is part of that equation of getting the justice system to be well-rounded and functioning. But also, too, I know that some people would say that it's a way, as you said, Mr. Henry, of getting people out of Bordelais because maybe you can't feed them, Bordelais is overcrowded. It's an easy fix. But there's the human rights aspect that you have individuals, and I know it's always dicey when you bring the human rights aspect in, because as you say, the victim, we say that the victim had no rights and so forth. But is there a possibility that granting someone parole can have that person further evolve as a functioning, well-rounded citizen, one who can now become law-abiding? A sort of come to Jesus moment for our inmates who will be granted parole. Have we seen that? How many do we have who have been granted parole? Give us a little update on how they have been functioning as individuals in our society.
Well, I don't know about the come to Jesus moment, but you know.
I would like to hope. I always talk hope.
But yes, I would have, Miss Innocent is well placed to respond to that question.
Most certainly, I can speak to the progress that they've made. And as a department, this is something that we always try to do, encourage them, empower them, right? Sometimes I think we don't understand, and I had to learn this from my parolees. We take for granted what freedom is, right? And you know, I never took time to understand what the impacts of incarceration on me as a person. And I've seen persons who've appreciated the opportunity that they've been given. They see it as a second chance to prove themselves, to be better. And at every step, in everything they do, in everything, it can be the slightest thing, like opening a bank account. If it's not going the proper way, the proper channels, something that they think would impact their parole, they're not going to be a part of it. They are not going to be a part of it. And Mr. Henry and myself and some of the other parole officers, we were having a conversation just recently about post-traumatic stress disorder, and that is what we've come to understand as it relates to what they are experiencing, and we acknowledge it and we empower them to move to appreciate what they are going through, appreciate what they've experienced, what their life at the correctional facility have been, and to help them with going through the challenges of what life is now, because it's a different world for them. It's a different world. It's a different world. And I've seen their successes. They are employed, law-abiding, when they come to the department. They're just wonderful persons, and you can see that change.
But does the society accept? And I think that's important for the reintegration. Is our society, by and large, accepting of giving individuals, convicts, a second chance?
I would say very slowly, but I have this, Miss Innocent calls it a flight of ideas thing that happens with me. So I want to address something that you said before. So remember that question. Remember the question you asked me, right? I was listening to my colleague speaking about, how beautiful it is for the parolee. And I'm sitting there, and I like to be the objective bystander, and I'm putting myself in the shoes of a son of the deceased in a murder or somebody in a rape. Or what if I'm the product of a rape? Yes? And the person who raped my mother, who is my father, biological father, is going to be granted parole. I'm listening to my colleagues, it's a good thing, and I know there are St. Lucians out there sitting and saying, look at these suckers, as if they're concerned about these people, because they're angry. And I think if our jurists, if our policymakers are listening, they need to recognize the need for victim support services, because it throws this process of balance. And I can't sit here and in good conscience say all the good things. Yes, I've seen the parolees we have currently. I've seen them. They're like babies. They're like babies when they come from the facility. And everything we're doing for them is good, yes, but we need not to forget, and I want St. Lucia to understand, that we are not only focused on that, because we have a duty, we have a job description, we have a duty to do the job that we are employed to do. And in so doing, I must highlight and defend the practices of my job. However, I'm very mindful that something is lacking in that point, fundamentally. And for that, I do not want our unit to take leaks in the public sphere because of something that we are supposed to do legally, and the bigger picture is not being painted in a different.
So then how do you, because that falls into the realm of the reintegration, and part of reintegration is having the society understand the processes, understand the human aspect of what it is that you do. And that reintegration also, but you've already said that you don't have the resources to really extend for victim services. So how do you now as a unit really for you to navigate those delicate balances?
What we do, you know.
Do you have any form of victim support?
I will explain to you. We're a small unit, probably about 14 of us on the island. I think with the addition of the parole officers, maybe 18. Small, very small unit.
And that is small.
And we're just creative. So some of us are trained in various areas, trauma, restorative practices such as restorative circles, restorative meetings. And what we do in some of those cases where the gaps are, we try, perhaps, have a trauma session or have a restorative meeting between the family of the victim, deceased, if the victim is deceased, and the parolees. And the parolees are very open. The restorative meetings, it has to be phased, it has to be, because, you have to give the people time to, to sort of climatize, for want of a better word, to agree to come to the
trial.
Yes. So our department, our unit rather, we find ourselves, people call us all sorts of things, so we are almost everything to everybody who interacts with us. So, and I think sometimes even the jurists in the country rely on us too much for things that we don't even have the capacity to do, but we do try. There's a part of your question I forgot. I warned you about giving me loaded questions.
But I think that
in terms of the reintegration and the society being ready, because it's fairly new for us.
Right.
But you've already acknowledged that we did not have the sort of society consultation, if you will, sensitizing people that, hey, this is going to happen. So we are, as you say, we're beginning to see the society open up to the idea of second chances.
But on the question of rehabilitation, I must tell you, I'm not into social media, but my family shares stuff with me and I see things. And St. Lucians are not very stupid people. We are becoming more and more intelligent, with whether by force or by, not by otherwise, and we are seeing things. And people know what happens at Bodley Correctional Facility. The inmates at Bodley Correctional Facility let it out. People who were incarcerated, they come out and they tell you, And when you speak of reintegration is one part of this process. Reintegration doesn't happen in the community when the person is released. Reintegration begins with a correctional plan. Reintegration is supposed to begin at the Bodley Correctional Facility. So we continue the reintegrative process, and what we focus on more is something called resettlement of the individual, of the parolee. And I want this to be clear. We are very aware of what we are doing. We as a unit, we have a case management approach to things. We have people who are able to do this work in this country. We need the autonomy, we need the latitude to do it, and we need the resources. So we are very concerned, and we understand the stigma that's associated with the jailbird syndrome. Because I grew up as a little boy in Miku, and when you hear that jailbird is out, everybody's afraid that jailbird is out. So we have that jailbird syndrome that affects the process. Now, if you do not go and debunk those things with your society, do it. We cannot be doing things as a unit for the country. We have to do it with the people. And when you do it with, just like we cannot say we're doing things for the parolee, we do things with the parolee. And when people are involved, then they have ownership of the process. And as we are, I think being here today is testament to what we believe is necessary for the public. And as I said, I apologize earlier for, the post sensitization, But yes, so I know what's responsible for that is the jailbird syndrome, and gradually you find, and I will tell you why it's gradual and why it's expanding, because we have more people in the country, we have more crime happening, and because of the more of those things, what you have is more families being affected. So when now crime hits your doorstep, you now realize what Mr. So-and-so was going through with his son or daughter 10 years ago. So now, when you come to that person who has experienced criminality, for want of a better word, at their doorsteps, they are more attuned, they are more sensitive. But that doesn't negate the responsibility on our part and government's part to have those public drives on matters that are very, very sensitive, because, and I understand the other aspect of it being very sensitive is that the criminal justice process is very archaic, from police arresting and this and that, to the court system. It's very archaic, and it's very difficult to change. So now when you have that sort of thing being activated, parole being activated, that's a big thing because of all of what we said earlier. So it is something that we understand the anxieties of the society, and I think we're very positive about the prognosis.
But how many, given the lack of resources that you have, being able to continuously have oversight, how many of these parolees can we have at any one time in a year?
I don't think there is a mandated number of parolees or applicants to be granted parole. I think whenever we've received an application from, like I explained earlier to you what the application process is, the onus is on, or the board has a responsibility, based on all of the information that they've received from the parole officer, to make that decision as to whether the applicant's rehabilitation will be further aided by parole. So that relies on the board. So if we receive 20 applications, the board is the one who makes the determination as to if 5 of them get parole, if 5 of them are denied. That relies on the board. There is no stipulated number of persons who are granted parole a year. No.
But the hearing is important. The hearing is almost like that final
most definitely.
thing. So that's the make or break of it all.
After receiving the information, the hearing, yes.
Yeah. So within that hearing setting, what happens? Who speaks? Who's questioning? How does that work? At
the hearing, the parole officer will present the applicant to the board. We'll read a short summary of all of the information that he or she has received during the investigative process. We'll present that to the board with the parolee. So you sort of like a support person for the parolee sitting next to the applicant, sorry. At the parole hearing, as per our past hearings, we've invited one support person for the applicant, so a family member, a friend, someone who they see as a major support system. They have the opportunity to ask that person to be with them at the hearing, and the family of the victim. That's an important part of the process. As I was explaining earlier, in the investigative process, the family of the victim, they are important. And Mr. Henry was alluding to it earlier. They have a voice. We are supposed to speak with them. We're supposed to formulate what we call a victim impact statement. And that is presented to the board as part of the dossier. The board receives that information, and they are also invited to the hearing. And at the hearing, they can also present to the board how they feel, what their emotions are, what they think about how their family has been impacted by the situation. So like we were saying, that it's not just about the applicant. Yes, we have a responsibility within our job description, but we give them a voice because they are an important part of the process. So that happens, the parolee is questioned by the members of the board, and the board is multifaceted. They're from various disciplines, and all of them ask very necessary questions from their disciplines to the applicants. And after that process, they deliberate for whatever amount of days that they need to, and they present a decision. Yeah.
Earlier, Herma asked you about, after the application, the board has decided to grant the parole. In terms of the life for the parolee, do you need, as a unit, you need to ascertain where that individual is going to be staying? Because there can be, because I heard you speak about the sort of home community, they may not necessarily return to their home community. So how do you now go about establishing that individual? Do you also need, and when I say you, the unit, does the unit now go into actively securing housing, securing job, and that sort of thing? How do you ensure that that individual is functioning in a way that's going to see to their welfare?
The release and community supervision strategy has a great part about accommodation. We are to be certain that this person has a suitable place to live. And it doesn't make sense to take someone out of an environment where they have food, where they can bathe, where they can get some place to sleep, and bring them into a place where they have absolutely no idea, well, where am I going to sleep tonight? Is there any water? Is there a toilet? Is there a bathroom? We have to be certain of these things. And that is where we incorporate the family of the applicants. So they, as had been the case with all of the applicants that we've had, they've provided that sort of residential support to the applicants, right? So we rely on them a great deal for that in terms of finding accommodation for them. As it relates to employment, that is another important part of the release and community supervision strategy. We know that money is important. We need money to do every single thing. And that is one thing. All of them, they're always concerned about finding a job. And they get to do a little something, to do something quickly to make $1 in terms of, and when I say, construction, they would be a part of it. So we facilitate these things. We assist them in terms of finding that sort of employment. We don't just leave them to go and fend for themselves. Like Mr. Henry said, we assist them. That is our role. So we assist them with finding suitable employment, empowering them with their skills like job ethics, financial management. We empower them with these skills that they would need to be functioning employees to just thrive in what they're doing.
And I suppose to add to that, one of the things, we are very capable at the unit. However, we do understand the extent of what we can provide, and we partner with other services, NGOs, and willing citizens. But I always speak upon the things that you say, Lisa, and I want to clarify things, because if I was not a probation parole professional, I would want the information that I'm giving me now. We want to debunk the myth. The parole board should have been here because they are the ones that make the decisions. If you realize, we facilitate a process at our unit. We facilitate a process, but the buck lies and stops with the parole board. We facilitate before, we facilitate after. Now, you ask about the hearing. The hearing is not a private endeavor, I want to get that clear. The hearing is not a private activity. It's regulated in a way that the whole of St. Lucia cannot come, or all media houses cannot come and clog up the place, But it's not a private affair. So the media can ask in writing, they can write to the board.
And ask for access? And
ask for access to attend all part of, the hearing. Also, the parole board members are gazetted. And the Gazette is like a newspaper. So it's not a, St. Lucia and a lot of our people are not interested in some of those things. Although perhaps maybe the government can make the Gazette more liquid, available, so it's not a private process. It is not. I want to emphasize that it's not a private process. The other thing, we spoke about reintegration earlier, and the importance of the adjusting of the sentencing. I think from a professional standpoint, if perhaps Irma is being sentenced today, and the judge says to her, Irma, because of whatever, you've been sentenced to 15 years at the Border Correctional Facility with the possibility of parole at the 7th year. I think that gives, because the judge has also gotten a pre-sentence report, remember? Mm-hmm. And that pre-sentence report will analyze the individual and say what will help those gaps in the individual's life, right? And the judge will have considered that, and the judge adds parole, a possibility of parole, to his or her sentence. What that does, it would give the, well, soon to be inmate, or the inmate, because they're probably on remand, give the inmate a thought, perhaps, to start that, okay, if I at least do well at the facility, if I ask for certain services, perhaps the inmate could even request a restorative meeting with the person that they have caused the harm whilst they're at the facility, because it happens in other jurisdictions. And then that person, knowing that they can get parole, will work towards achieving parole at the 7th year. You understand? So these are some of the dynamics. I say these things because I want St. Lucia to understand that we are circumspect at the unit. We don't just do things with tunnel vision. We don't just do things in silos, or we don't just do things unaware of the big picture. Yeah.
You know, so much information that you've given us right now, and for me at least, understanding, the process, both sides, and how it affects the entire picture. You've started the whole process. In terms of misconceptions that you may have not addressed, that you come across, are there any that you think is important to address? Things people may have thought about when they think of parole, and that might not necessarily be the case?
You have things or matters or areas such as being soft on crime, or getting an early release. Parole,
or the inmate is playing you.
Yes, and these are the things that, I mean, you go to a tailor, and you, in your mind, as the person wanting the tailor to provide you a service, you are telling the tailor what you want, but you do not understand how the tailor is going to put this stitch here, do that, to give the result on your body that you want the garment to fit. And sometimes people do not understand that we have the capacity to analyze the information, analyze the situation, until such time that is actually done and they're, oh wow, these people know what they're about. And I'm confident that over the years I've spent at the unit, and I've gotten to know my colleagues, and not just my internal colleagues. We work with almost all the lawyers on Ireland. We work with all of them who come to our unit, the judges, the magistrates, and so on. So over that time, we amassed significant knowledge and understanding of the dynamics of the St. Lucian situation as it relates to pre-sentencing, post-sentencing, pre-prison, in-prison, post-prison. So we have a sort of neurological authority, so to speak, on the matters of what we do. And misconceptions of, for example, early release. Parole, yes, the person is released earlier by virtue of parole, but early release really happens under the Correctional Services Act, where I think the Director of Corrections has the authority to do that there. Yes? But the earliness of the release on the parole side, it's a completely different thing. If I am correct, and today is the only day I'm not certain about this, but I will take a chance and say it. If under the Correctional Services Act, I'm not certain that the Director of Corrections can return the person to the prison. I'm not sure that's what that it operates like this. But under a parole order, the person literally the person does not have the shackles. They don't have the electronic tagging. But like this, the parole board can match them back up to Bodley.
Because there are certain guidelines and rules they need to follow.
Right.
We have come into our closing moments, because that was one of two questions I had left for you. That, give us the guidelines. What is it that they're going to violate that's going to return them to Bodley?
So earlier we spoke about the parole order, right? So within the parole order, it outlines specific things that the parolee must abide to while on parole. And that is that they receive the parole order from the board, and the board might give them special conditions as it relates to not consuming alcohol, staying at a particular place, probably a curfew. The board may give them these things. And another part of it is that you cannot be arrested for a different offense while you are on parole. That can cause a suspension or forfeiture or revocation, of your parole, and that can result further in a forfeiture. And when you are returned to the correctional facility, you can no longer apply for parole on the matter for which you were granted parole in the first place. But that doesn't mean that if you are recently charged, so if you were charged, say for example, you were on parole for robbery, so if you were charged for probably assaulting someone, it doesn't mean that you cannot apply for parole on that new charge after you've met the eligibility criteria.
So it certainly differentiates.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to ask is, have you had any instances where a parolee just can't cope on the outside? That individual can't cope? Have you had a reoffender? Well, yes. Have you had, I mean, you just explained the violation aspect, but have you had an instance where you've had an individual revocated?
As at present, no. We've not had that experience. Like we explained earlier, it is a very new process, and we are in our second year. We've not had any of these instances with any of the parolees.
So that says you on the right track.
We don't foresee that happening.
Right, either. Yes.
With the current
sets. Yeah.
How comprehensive you are.
Yes.
But in terms of coping, I think that's very important. The sort of counseling services that you provide, or are you collaborating with an entity for that?
Well, we do partner with different agencies, and the parolee and the parole officer, like, they're supposed to maintain contact while on parole. So the parole officer is equipped with the skills and the knowledge to acknowledge or to observe when the parolee is having some sort of challenge. And what we do at the department is take some form of case management approach. I think that we might need the advice on different persons within the department on, and we make a decision that will be to the benefit of the individual, the client, to empower them and to help them to work through these challenges. If we are not able to provide the resources at our department, we do outsource these services to assist the parolee the best way we can.
All right, well, we want to thank you for coming through and giving us a sort of synopsis of what happens there. I know it's far deeper than that. Homer, as always, we give a standing invitations that anytime
a conversation that needs to be
continued, and next time we will chop up the various areas in order for you to be able to delve into it. I know you have some parting words, so I'll give you 40 seconds. 40 seconds. I see you.
No, I was just looking. We covered everything. I'm just happy for the opportunity for St. Lucians, not for me. I could have been behind my desk hiding for the rest of my service.
But look how patriotic you are in the month of our independence anniversary.
I recognize that, but thank you. But on a serious note, St. Lucians need not be alarmed. We are capable. Our doors are open at the Department of Home Affairs, especially the Probation Parole Services Unit. Our doors are open for information, clarity. We need not be alarmed. We are capable within our remit. The rest has to be done by the state, and we are confident that we will do well. We will do well.
Well, everything shows that you are already on the right path. But Roger's arms are flinging to the back, as always,
Yes.
Homer. So that's our absolute signal that we have to say goodbye. I want to thank you so much, Shauna, for coming through. Thank you, Constable Henry, the Assistant Director for the Probation and Parole Unit. I am Lisa Joseph alongside the beautiful Homer DeMarc. We'll see you next time. Roger.